49 points in fantasy. Wow. That's nuts. So much to digest over the weekend. Welcome back, X's and Bros, Monday through Friday, 6 till 9. It's great to watch as many games as you can to try and, I guess, in your mind, figure out who's really good, who's not, which team, who's in the MVP race, all those different things. Saquon Barkley last night, in case you went to bed, after the second half, or after the half, I should say. So in the second half, first play in the third quarter, sprints touchdown, ends up with over 330 yards from scrimmage. Saquon Barkley, the trend on social media at the time was he's now in the MVP conversation. And my immediate thought was, when the hell was he not in the MVP conversation? I mean, outside maybe the first couple of weeks. Did you not think he was in the MVP conversation going into the game last night in Los Angeles? Which, by the way, who in their right mind wants to play there? I always laugh when I hear people say, well, Detroit's not a destination site. I mean, teams want to go to Los Angeles and things of that nature. Maybe in baseball. You know, I get that with the Dodgers and their history and the belief that team is willing to spend as much as it can to win, their commitment to winning, the superstars that are playing on that team, no doubt. I guess in Los Angeles for the Lakers, right? I mean, everybody and their brother wants to play with LeBron, of course. But in football, who wants to go to L.A.? There's more Eagles fans in Los Angeles than there were Rams fans. Packers played there earlier this year. There was more Green Bay fans than there were Rams fans or Chargers fans, whoever they played there. And you play the Chargers, I mean, you're going to see tonight in Baltimore, I mean, there just doesn't, it's not a good football market. This team won a Super Bowl a few years ago, and there's more Eagles fans. It's not like they haven't made the playoffs. Last year, they made the playoffs. They made a strong push to get to the postseason, and you still can't find as many Rams fans as Philly fans in LA. Anyway, Saquon Barkley, bust loose, was unbelievable last night. If you're into fantasy football, like I am for the first time this year, 49 fantasy points. That'll put you over the top, won't it? Absolutely. So now, most scrimmage yards through the first 11 games, all right, since the year 2000. Saquon Barkley has 1,649. The only players ahead of him, Priest Holmes, Christian McCaffrey, we did it a few years ago, Chris Johnson, remember him for Tennessee, DeMarco Murray, and Amon Green. And speaking of Chris Johnson, might be the best example when people are looking for ways to describe Jahmyr Gibbs. Jonathan Vilma, who did part of the broadcast for Fox yesterday for the Lions game, used Chris Johnson as the example. And I thought, man, that's a good one. That's a really good one. That dude was lightning in a bottle, without a doubt. Now, the Lions win over the Colts 24-6. Really impressive. Loved what the defense stood for. Wanted a little bit more pressure on Anthony Richardson, but Aleem McNeil was an absolute house-wrecking machine. It was awesome. Injuries, though, Khalif Raymond, outstanding punt returner, kick returner, foot problem, carted off the field. That's concerning. And it's as concerning for his return as it would be who takes his place. Don't want Amon-Ra St. Brown back there fielding punts. I do not want it. Too many things can happen in this ridiculous game and that type of injury-threatening position. Punt returner, kick returner. Just don't want it. You want to put him back there because he's got great hands, the best hands on the team, and you want to just do, okay, let's do this. Let's fair catch everything. Okay. I'm fine with that. You notice he fair caught the first one. The next one, he sprints to the sidelines. That was a directive from Dan Campbell and his staff. Do not start peeling up the middle and leave yourself open to some wrecking ball coming downfield. So that's concerning, of course. Carlton Davis with an injury. That's concerning because he has been so very good, and it was a knee injury. Taylor Decker had an ankle injury. Left, did come back. That's good. But still, bumps, bruises, these things all add up. And then David Montgomery, of course, he actually went to the tent, then went to the locker room, then came back out. 4 key guys, really important players. This is the hard thing about winning a championship. It's the hard thing about winning on a week-to-week basis in the NFL. Look at Brandon Graham last night. Brandon Graham was unbelievable for Philadelphia last night. He says he's done for the year with an injury. Now, I don't know if that's the case. Nick Sirianni, the Eagles head coach, wouldn't go that far. But Brandon Graham said it. I think it was a torn bicep. Is that what it was? Something like that. Anyway, bottom line is, this time of the year, when you're playing this many games, it's hard to stay healthy. And now the Lions got to turn around and play in 4 days. Usually your day is Monday you go in, you get treatment, you watch film. Tuesday is a mandatory day off. Wednesday you're back on the practice field. Thursday and Friday. Saturday, a quick walkthrough. You jump on the plane or the bus, wherever the case may be, and you're gone, right? Obviously not the case this week. Everything is sped up. It'll be interesting to see how Dan Campbell continues to adjust his practice schedule as he has each year he's been here for this week. The good news is Lions players and staff are used to this. They know what it's like. Not that they've been doing it since 1934 when George A. Richards first started this tradition, but since Dan Campbell's been here, they've been able to adjust, and the players are used to doing what they do best during this week. The deep concern you have, and you go up against a Bears team that has still got a pretty damn good defense, is what do you do about those guys? I think the beauty of what Dan Campbell has done with this team is he understands firsthand what it's like to be a player. So he can relate to, at this time of the season, especially late in November, when you've played 11 games and it's been 12 weeks overall, and you still have basically half a season to go. You understand what it takes to keep your guys sharp, keep them fresh. This is why going undefeated, just adjust your expectations. It is so hard to do what these guys do. I'm not kidding you, man. It is grueling to try and figure out the best way to take care of your mind and your body and still prep for a team that is waiting to knock you off because you have that proverbial bullseye on your back all season long. You can have as many inspirational speeches as you want from a coach in the locker room. It's got to come down to taking care of your body. And at this time of the year, it's hard to do that. Look, this is why I go on these rants of Roger Goodell wanted to play an 18th game. Damn, it's hard. It is so difficult to stay healthy. You almost feel like with Kansas City losing who they lost at the beginning of the season, Rice and Pacheco, you feel like you're almost better off losing them at the beginning of the year than at this time of the season. Wouldn't want to lose a guy like Aiden Hutchinson. Didn't necessarily want to have to trade for Zadarius Smith because you lost Marcus Davenport earlier this year or Derek Barnes earlier this year. Glad they did, but you didn't. Beginning of the season, right? Huge challenge. It's even more difficult now. It tests your depth. It tests your strength. Probably the worst time to be playing on a short week after what they just experienced Sunday in Indianapolis. Our phone number on the Meyer hotline, 866-838-4843. You can always text the program, Sports Radio, to 21,000. 1934, the last time they've won 9 in a row. We'll put that in perspective when we come back after this.
Huge here for my good friend Josh Garvey. Now, Josh joins me in studio every Thursday with former Lion Lomas Brown and Dorn Mayhew, one of the world's top accounting and CPA firms, presents Inside the Lions. Thursdays 5 until 6. Josh Garvey, managing shareholder of Dorn Mayhew's GR office, is in studio with me, and Lomas is on the phone from Detroit, and we're talking about the Lions pass game, the upcoming game, the NFC North, and the NFL. That's every Thursday during the 5 p.m. hour. Lomas Brown, Josh Garvey with me on The Huge Show.
.35 after the hour. Welcome back, X's and Bros, on a Monday through Friday, 6 until 9 throughout the great state of Michigan. Glad you're with us and listening, whether it be in Cadillac on WKAD, the Ticket 93.7 FM, in Grand Rapids that serves Kalamazoo, and Holland on WMAX 96.1 FM, the game on WMBN 104.7 FM, and the Ticket Northern Michigan, WVFN AM 730, the Score in Lansing, Traverse City, WKAD 93.7 FM, the Ticket. It's awesome to be with you on this Monday. By the way, I said earlier that Brandon Graham, I think, is out for the year when we were talking about injuries and the difficulty of navigating an NFL season, trying to stay as healthy as you can to keep yourself in line to win a championship. So many things have to go right for you, not just on the field in terms of winning games, but also in health. Brandon Graham out with a torn triceps. I said bicep, it's torn tricep. And we were talking about Saquon Barkley earlier. So Saquon Barkley is just the second player in history, according to NFL.com, the second player in history to have over 500 yards from scrimmage in a combined back-to-back week form. All right, 2 weeks in a row, the total of 500 yards from scrimmage or more. The other is the great Walter Payton. We're going to put the 1934, since the last time Detroit won 9 in a row, it was 1934. We're going to put that in perspective here in a moment. But the Athletic came out last night or early this morning with what they consider to be the pulse of the NFL and whose records are actually lying. So this kind of leads me to my conversation with somebody yesterday during the Lions game, and that is, I don't think this team, that team, whatever team you want to put in there, Minnesota was the example used, is really what their record should be. In other words, they're saying their record was lying. So I thought that's interesting. How did you feel about Kansas City? They responded and said, I don't think Kansas City is as good as their record would indicate either. I said, what about the Lions? Do you think the Lions are legit? And they said, absolutely. Now, I don't know if that's them being personalized because they love the Lions so much, and I respect it if they do, but you got to use an open mind when it comes to these things. So I read this Athletic article early this morning, and they said the Eagles' actual record at 9-2, and then they'll give you whether or not the Pulse record is believable. And they say 9-2, yes, absolutely, especially after the 37-20 blowout win over the Rams in Los Angeles last night, in which Barkley, as I mentioned, had 255 yards rushing, over 300 total yards from scrimmage. Just an amazing performance by Saquon Barkley last night. So, of course, where do I go? I go to the Lions. I want to see the Vikings. I want to see the Chiefs. And the reason I want those is because this person I was talking to didn't believe the Vikings record was all that great. Didn't believe the Chiefs record was really who they are. So the Lions' actual record is 10-1, as you know. What do you think the Pulse's record would be? The Athletic. Do you think it's legit 10-1 or not? They don't believe it is. They actually think the Lions should be 11-0. They think they're better than their record. And here's what they write. Let's be brief. This is the best team in the NFL. Thank you. Been saying that for a while now. Barring injury, another key thing we've been talking about, the Lions should be favored in every game going forward, all the way to the Super Bowl if the football gods deem them worthy. San Francisco looked horrible. I know you don't believe in Brock Purdy in the MVP conversation, nor do I. But he's a starter in the NFL. And you could tell, dipping into your backup pool, it wasn't great for San Francisco yesterday. Anyway, they continue. A 24-6 win over the Colts yesterday wasn't flashy, but no seeds of doubt fell into the proverbial soil. The Lions are not 10-1. They should actually be 11-0. The hard thing about that is, let's say you beat Tampa, who I think is a decent team. They've got some energy to them. Baker Mayfield's had a really nice year. In fact, I think Baker Mayfield's thrown more touchdowns since 2023 than any quarterback in football. At least I read that earlier today on social media. That said, we know why Detroit lost to Tampa, right? Okay, the red zone issue. What happens if you beat Tampa? Do you think you go on that long run? I don't know. It's hard to figure that out. lot of people would say, what would make you believe that they wouldn't? Nothing other than the odds in football and the chances of trying to play as well as they've had, no matter what, is really challenging. But they've done it. And it's the big reason why we all feel like they're the best team in football. Anyway, they go down to the Chiefs. So this is why I brought up the Chiefs with the person I was discussing yesterday. Actual record 10-1, as you know. The Athletic says the Pulse record is 7-4. Let's start throwing shade. Kansas City was lucky to beat the Panthers yesterday, emerging victorious on a game-winning field goal as time expired. 8 of the Chiefs' 10 wins have come by a single score. Fair enough. That is not convincing, is it? I'm not sure why people believe that in order for you to think they're as good as they should be or their record would indicate, you have to beat teams convincingly. To me, the mark of a really good football team is also the ability to win close games, especially when you're a 2-time defending world champion. If this wasn't Patrick Mahomes, I'd be spray painting fraud on the walls of the team facility. The players seem to know the truth as well. And the players also, in case you didn't know, yesterday they have recognized some of their weaknesses. Every team should do that. I mean, you look yourself in the mirror and you recognize, okay, not everything is so great. I mean, it's way too close. They needed a big Patrick Mahomes run down the left sideline to get in field goal position. They understand that they need to play at a higher clip. But you know what? If I'm winning, to me, it doesn't matter. If I'm winning those close games, big picture, it does. But if I'm winning those close games, I'd rather be in that situation than losing those close games. 49ers, they 5-6. Okay. Texans, the chic pick going into the season because everybody loves CJ Stroud, who has had a tough adjustment as his sophomore season. Actual record 7-5. Pulse record says 5-7. Commanders are not as good as their record would indicate. So I wanted to scroll down and see what about Minnesota? What about a few other teams? They didn't necessarily go there. They only picked up 6 teams, but Detroit is seen as a much better team than their record would indicate. All right, 1934 is the last time that the Lions had won 9 in a row. I wanted to give you a perspective on just how long ago that was. All right, instead of you doing the math going, oh my God, I want to give you some perspective here. So, for example, 1934, the Giants were the NFL champs. It's a far cry now. The Blackhawks clinched the Stanley Cup, and the St. Louis Cardinals won the World Series. May not put it in perspective for you, but this might. Babe Ruth was nearing the end of his career. He signed a $35,000 contract with the Yankees. That was $17,000 less than he had been making. The most famous outlaws in America were John Dillinger and Bonnie and Clyde. Let that resonate for a minute. You're shaking your head, but that's true. The United States, unfortunately, was in the midst of the Great Depression. The unemployment rate was close to 22%. Over 15 million Americans were looking for work and could not find a job, with the highest unemployment rate of New Mexico, North Dakota, Oklahoma, and South Dakota. The president, of course, was Roosevelt. You had Bing Crosby involved. A Studebaker truck cost $625. Think about that for a second. A car costs $625. That is absolutely crazy. That puts it in perspective, I think, right there. Right? Absolutely. In 1934, Babe Ruth hit his 700th career home run and played his last game. Amazing. And Pepsi introduced the 12-ounce bottle to compete with rival Coca-Cola. And they did that back in 1934. Now you've got an idea. Not to mention the fact that there were just by the way, it was the sixth Academy Awards. And there were 10 spelling bees at the time. That'll give you an idea of how long it's been since the Lions won 9 consecutive games, 1934. And supposedly, maybe it's fitting, 1934 was the first Thanksgiving Day game in Lions history, right? George A. Richards owned a radio station. The Tigers were the big deal back then. He owned the Lions. He wanted to find a way to make his team a little bit more front and center. How do you do that? They played on Thanksgiving. He owned a radio station. He got other NBC network stations to jump on board. 96, I believe, carried the game, and a tradition was born. Much, much later, the Cowboys got involved, but it was the Lions moving forward with this Thanksgiving Day tradition that is now expanded to 3 games in one day. That includes a Green Bay Packers game against Miami this coming Thursday as well. It's pretty awesome. Now, we talked earlier today a little bit about the offense and the defense and the fact that the Lions offense gets so much love. And I'm not going to disregard that. I think they've got the best offensive line. Philadelphia's offensive line was really impressive last night because the Rams' defensive front 4 is stout. And the Eagles' offensive line pushed them around. They were physical. They were tough. You're not going to win every battle on every single snap. Team takes 76 snaps, and you think you're going to win all 76? Give me a break. But they were really impressive. With the Lions, we feel, and I'm sure there's a little bit of bias here in all of us, we feel that the Lions' offensive line is the best in football. I'll take them. I'll take the Lions' offensive line over anybody. But Philly's is impressive too. And my hope is that people in Philadelphia feel the exact same way about Detroit. Anyway, you got that. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jameson Williams, whoever you want to throw in there, go ahead. Best duo in the offensive backfield in Montgomery and Gibbs. Agreed. An MVP candidate in Jared Goff. He is. I mean, if you look at the odds right now, it's Lamar Jackson, it's Josh Allen, and it's Jared Goff and Saquon Barkley, even with the same odds. But the defense, especially consider what they've lost. When you lose your best edge rusher and your leading tackler, that is so hard to overcome, man. You can talk about depth all you want, but it's really challenging to overcome the loss of those impact players. It's one thing, with all due respect, losing Marcus Davenport and Derek Barnes. Yes, it hurts your depth. It hurts the ability to rotate your defensive linemen, but it pales in comparison to losing a guy like Aiden Hutchinson. We're talking about impact here, okay? It pales in comparison in losing to a guy like Alex Anzalone, who is on the field for every single snap. Not that Rodriguez can't come in and do a decent enough job, that a number of other players can't come in and fill the void, but it requires all those players filling one man's job. Remember what we used to always say about the Tigers? You want everyday guys. On defense, you like every down guys. On offense, you'd like every down guys, right? Lions have every down wide receivers. Rarely are you seeing Jameson Williams come off the field to play, or Amon-Ra St. Brown. Maybe a Sam Laporta gets spelled for a Brock Wright. Maybe it's double tight, and that's the only reason you're bringing them off. But it's not because of ineffectiveness. It's not because they can't do their job. Whereas in baseball, you want matchups. Football, there's matchups too. But the Lions have guys who excel in those matchups. They are every down players. It's a little misleading when it comes to football defensive front 4 because it's really hard to play that many snaps as a defensive lineman. All right. So Aleem McNeil's had a great year. He really has. You're going to take him off the field just because you get worn down. So you've got to have guys who rotate there. You lose your best edge rusher. That's virtually impossible to replace. You lose a guy who is an every down linebacker, pass play and run stopper. That's hard to overcome. I don't care how good Ben Neiman is. I don't care how good Malcolm Rodriguez is. You're rotating those two guys in there to make up for one Alex Anzalone. Well, the defense has come out, and you've got to give them a massive amount of credit. You hold a Colts team to 268 total yards, knowing full well that's a quarterback. It's not like Anthony Richardson is anything special right now. Just a couple of years in, but last year lost most of it to injury. He's a dual threat. Now, sometimes I know you and I watch that game together, and we probably say, that dude can't hit the broadside of the barn. He looks awful. Wouldn't want him as my fantasy quarterback. Wouldn't want him as an everyday quarterback, especially in Indianapolis. We've had the greats like, at least Colts history, the greats of Johnny Unitas. Burt Jones was a hell of a player. He's a former MVP. Peyton Manning, of course. Earl Morrall before that, by the way. But Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, where they've been since. It's really hard to find, right? So he was not great yesterday. Detroit put some pressure on him. Would have liked a little bit more, but Detroit put some pressure on him. But he's always a threat to run. And yet you hold that offense to that number of yards, 268 yards. That's pretty damn good. Give them some credit. You're without Terrion Arnold. You're playing with Vildor in the backfield, right? You lose a guy like Carlton Davis. You've already lost a guy like Aiden Hutchinson and Alex Anzalone. This is a patch group bunch of guys who went out there and took care of business against a team that has a tendency to move the football in different ways. Jonathan Taylor's a hell of a running back. You and I both take him, wouldn't you? Absolutely. And forces you to be on high alert for that type of scrambling quarterback, that type of athletic quarterback that can give defenses some issues. So a hell of a job for Detroit to do what they did defensively. As much as we talk about the offense, the defense deserves a ton of credit for yesterday's win. Phone number on the Meyer hotline, 866-838-4843. You can text the program Sports Radio to 21,000. We will go from football to a little bit of baseball. A Tigers division rival gets a lot better yesterday. And who do you tender and who would you let walk? All that associated with the Tigers when we come back. Reminder that at 8:18, we will have our hero and heel for the weekend. We're looking forward to yours as well as we roll on into the second hour on X's and Bros right after this. Back with you on X's and Bros throughout the state of Michigan and on StreamYard via live on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, at XB Mornings, on Facebook and on YouTube at X's and Bros. Matt Shepard with you, Trent Valley, our producer. We have him now after missing him the first hour of the show. He was out getting coffee and bagels from Big Apple Bagels. We're glad he's back. Doesn't have anything for us. By the way, have you seen my sweatshirt? You see this? Yeah. Grand Valley sent me a care pack. Can't thank the coaches enough. Really appreciate it. Very nice of them. And I'm wearing it because they won over the weekend, you know. So we had Scott Worcester on Friday. This is not the key by any stretch. There's no association whatsoever. So please don't think I'm saying that. But we had him on Friday. They go out and they win. And Nick Postma, one of the assistant coaches, sent me a hat, a couple of shirts, really nice pair of sweatpants. So I wanted to wear this in support of Grand Valley's playoff win last weekend. They've got another one this weekend. And then if they win that and Ferris State wins, you'll see those two in a rematch. So that'd be awesome stuff for the state of Michigan, wouldn't it? I like this a lot. It's got a little bit of a hood. Now, my wife tells me this, Nick, or Trent. Coach Postma sends me this, and my wife says, that's for young people. What you have on right now is for young people, not for you, which I guess, my plan was to wear this to the gym and look pretty cool, but apparently that's not possible anymore. Anyway, thanks to Grand Valley for sending that, specifically Coach Postma, and we wear it with great pride. It's awesome stuff. I know we talk a lot about football. You want to talk about it? Feel free. I mean, give us a call on the Meyer hotline, 866-838-4843. You can text the program Sports Radio to 21,000. We'll dip back into it in the 8 o'clock hour as well. We've got our hero and heels ready at 8:18. If you've got one, you know the phone number, you know the text line, feel free. This caught my eye yesterday or over the weekend. The Royals traded one of their starters in Brady Singer. Now, this was a team, remember, Matt Cotrero, big reason for their success this year is they primarily used 4 or 5 starters. Other teams like Milwaukee used 17 starters to get through the season, and Milwaukee did it and won their division because their bullpen was arguably the best in the National League. Kansas City relied more on their starters than they did their bullpen. Brady Singer is a guy you recognize. You know how he has tormented the Tigers for years. Last year, 9-13 with an ERA close to 4. In his career, in 13 starts, he's 6-1. More wins against Detroit than any other team he's played, which is a little misleading because they play Detroit and Cleveland and Minnesota and Chicago more than any other team. But still, the success is there. I can't say that I've completely bought into the term Tigers killer for pitchers or for even hitters for that matter, because teams change pretty regularly, right? So if a guy has great success, Jose Ramirez, is it strictly because he's playing the Tigers or because the pitchers that the Tigers employ? And the Tigers use different pitchers on a pretty regular basis. He's going to see different pitchers when he plays them. But Brady Singer has seemingly had great success against Detroit. He goes to Cincinnati. So Cincinnati picks up a right-handed starter and a guy that over the last 5 years has an ERA of a little bit more than 4, 127 career starts, and a guy who does not have a winning record. And in return, Kansas City gets Jonathan India, former Rookie of the Year, when he hit a career-high 21 homers, a guy who's 1 year younger than Brady Singer, for what it's worth, 250 hitter, 15 bombs last year, and a second baseman. I don't know what that does to Michael Massey for Kansas City. I don't know where that puts him, but India's a good defensive player too. Works better with Bobby Witt Jr., and suddenly you've got a really good first baseman in Vinny Pasquantino. I think you've got a solid second baseman in Jonathan India. You've got an MVP candidate shortstop in Bobby Witt Jr. And third base, Michael Garcia, whether you want to move Michael Massey there, I don't know what their plan is, but they've done something to address that. In addition to that, Kansas City also gets Joey Weimer. And he's a guy who's from the state of Michigan. He's only 25, but he's already been with 3 different teams. All right. He was with Milwaukee, he was with Cincinnati, and now he's with Kansas City. I believe that Kansas City has gotten better. They trade away a former first-round pick in Brady Singer. Now, you might have an idea of where I might be going with this. Actually, he was a second-round pick, my bad. Originally out of Toronto, but then a first-round pick, 18th overall, out of the University of Florida in 2018. That's what happens in baseball, in case you're unaware. I hope you are, but you can get drafted more than once because you get drafted out of high school, you choose to go to college. You got to spend 3 years there, unless it's a junior college, 3 years there, and you're back in the draft. So he was drafted out of high school by Toronto in the second round, said, forget it, I want to go to Florida. He goes to Florida, helps him win a national championship, Alex Faedo and everybody part of that. And then he's a first-round pick, 18th overall. Some people believed he was the best pitcher that draft class. Casey Mize was part of that. And Singer was one of, I believe Kansas City used their first 4 or 5 picks on pitchers that year. That's when Casey Mize and Joey Bard and Alec Boehm went. Nick Madrigal. Singer was 18th overall by the Royals and has turned out to be, at least he's made it to the big leagues where a lot of guys taken ahead of him didn't even make it there. But bottom line is Kansas City, I think, got a lot better. Joey Weimer is probably more of a situational guy. He can play a decent center field. He's got a decent arm. He's a big guy, but he can roam center field and did so in Milwaukee with some pretty good success. Meanwhile, Detroit is trying to figure out, they have figured out the guys that they're going to keep, the guys that they were going to do on arbitration. They did Zach McKinstry on a 1-year arbitration, and they did Andy Ibanez on a 1-year arbitration. All right. So those 2 guys will be back. And I think what you're seeing from the Tigers right now, not that they have to make these big splashes in free agency to win you over, but as I told you at the end of the season, this team might look a little different, but it's not going to look a lot different. How they're going to field their team is going to be financially based. And you're not going to see, I don't believe, a really big splash. I laughed on social media when I saw so many people suggesting that you have Alex Bregman in your crosshairs to bring in. You've got other big names like Pete Alonso in your crosshairs to bring in. And it just wasn't going to happen. Not that free agency's over. Not that those guys have signed anywhere. But my belief, bringing McKinstry back, bringing Ibanez back, means they're going to go about their business very similar to what they did this past season. I really hope I'm wrong, but all of those who thought Willie Adames would be a really good fit at third base, and even though I think he would be, you're going to have a similar team that you had this past year, and A.J. Hinch is going to be forced to work some magic. He's going to have to deal with various lineups, various guys in various situations on a pretty regular basis. That's who this team is going to be. Zach McKinstry and Andy Ibanez are nice fits for a lot of teams. They're going to get their at-bats in situationals, right? But Detroit is going to be committed, and to a certain extent, maybe you understand why, to certain players at their certain positions. They are not going out and making a big splash or 2. Maybe 1 guy, but they're going to look for short-term deals that keeps them cap-friendly. Kansas City goes out and makes a deal unless you can get creative, unless Scott Harris can get creative and make some type of trade using one of the guys that he already has as a pitcher, a guy like Casey Mize, to bring in and address. They're not doing it via free agency. It's got to be via trade like Kansas City just did. When we come back, a couple of first rounders taken after Ron Holland II are making some history. Does it make you wonder? That's next on X's and Bros as we roll on a Monday morning. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Simple and to the point for Dan Campbell post-game sound, courtesy of the Lions, DetroitLions.com. By the way, they're also undefeated on the road this year. Okay, 6-0 on the road. How many teams are undefeated away from their home barn? Any idea? How many other teams are 6-0 on the road? There's nobody outside of Detroit. No other team is undefeated on the road. I'm not saying that's going to continue, but to me, that's super impressive. Immediately, what I do is I think of, all right, who have they played on the road? Arizona historically has not been an easy place for Detroit to win, and yet they did. Dallas was their most convincing roadkill of the year, and Dallas wasn't as bad then as they are right now, even though they won yesterday, if that makes sense to you. All right. It was earlier in the season. Yeah. Minnesota's really, really hard to win on the road. All right. And that's a good Minnesota team. Green Bay on the road. Really hard to win there. All right. They're a team that is 8-3 this season. The Texans on the road. These are challenging places to win. What do they have left? They've got Chicago and San Francisco. Now, Chicago with the wind, you would expect, and the inclement weather could be challenging. It was hard for Minnesota yesterday. Don't think that just because of their record. Look beyond the record, okay? It's tough. Look what Kansas City had to deal with Carolina. But when you see that stuff and you go on the road and you win, now maybe there's a part of it that takes away from Dallas because Dallas hasn't won at home this year. It's incredible. But think of this. Minnesota at home, 1 loss to Detroit. Green Bay, just 2 home losses so far this season. Houston's a team, just 2 home losses this season. Detroit, one of them. It speaks volumes, I think, of this coaching staff and what they've done. And you heard Dan Campbell refer to AG as in Aaron Glenn because he's been with him throughout. Aaron Glenn's defense has not allowed a touchdown in back-to-back weeks. It's the first time the Lions have been able to boast such a statistic since 1999. 1999 was the last time Detroit went consecutive weeks without allowing a touchdown. Alex Anzalone tweeted that yesterday. Here are the teams. They played at Carolina in that game and beat them 24-9. And then the next week, they beat Tampa 20-3. And if you're wondering in 1999 what this team looked like offensively, Jermaine Crowell, but defensively, that's the team that had Ron Rice and Mark Carrier and Alan Aldridge and Stephen Boyd and Luther Ellis and players like that. All right. So little Chris Claiborne was their linebacker. If you remember Chris Claiborne out of USC, I remember when the Lions made him a first-round pick, I was like, yes, that dude is awesome. Not necessarily. Unfortunately, was not as great. Terry Fair was part of that. Robert Bailey was part of that. So that gives you a little perspective on what Detroit's defense has done. We talked earlier in the show about how the offense gets a lot of love, and I understand why, but the defense has been really impressive so far as well. And I think it's something that more and more people need to do a better job of recognizing. All right, let me ask you this. You always hear about redrafting in sports all the time. If you had it to do over again, not that you can necessarily judge a guy on 20 plus games. It's not fair. All right. You can't even do it on a season as far as I'm concerned. It's really hard to judge rookies on a season. We brought up earlier in the show about Jaden Daniels, who I think is a hell of a player, and I think he's going to be a hell of a player. You like him? I do too. Yeah, I mean, throws a nice deep ball, seems very calm in the pocket. Really like what he's doing. He was the shoo-in for Offensive Rookie of the Year just a couple of weeks ago, wasn't he? For sure. Now look at Bo Nix. It took Bo Nix a little bit of time for him to get comfortable. You could tell, right? A reminder, this is a guy who has started more games at the collegiate level than any other quarterback in college football history. That may say something about him because many people feel like if you're that good, you're going to jump to the pros. But when you start at Auburn and then you go to Oregon and you have the success he had, whatever. All right. He chose to stay. That was obviously his decision. It may have been a little bit of an eye-opening experience when you start the first week. You only throw for 138 yards. There was a game in there against the Jets where they won, but he only threw for 60 yards or 80 yards or so. He has been really good the last couple of weeks. In fact, if you look at his numbers over the last 7 games, he's got 6, 8, 11, 13, 15, 16 touchdowns and 2 picks. And that's over a larger sample size. But last 9 games, 16 touchdowns and 2 picks. In other words, he's taking really good care of the football. And more importantly, he has led his team to victories. He hasn't thrown for a gaudy amount of yards, 2,500. But for a guy who many people thought of as an afterthought, definitely the last quarterback taken in that draft, he's been really good. So it does take some time for rookies to adjust. Such is the case for Ron Holland, for the Pistons. It's taken him a little bit of time to work his way into his role. 2 of the names, and I said this after the NBA draft, for me, I was going to compare him to moving forward were Dalton Knecht and Donovan Clingan. Clingan came out of UConn. Knecht came out of Tennessee. Both were All-Americans. Did you see what the 7'2" Clingan did the other day for Portland? He did something that only 3 other players in history have done. He's blocked at least 1 shot in his first 17 career games. The other players to do that are Alonzo Mourning, Shaquille O'Neal, and Paul Gasol. Dalton, that's pretty good company, right? Dalton Knecht, what has he done? He had a rookie record 9 triples in a game. It's amazing what he's done. Both those guys are in the conversation for who are the top 5 rookies so far in the NBA. Early season sample size, granted. Ron Holland's nowhere to be found, unfortunately. Different roles, different teams, different expectations. Got to take a quick time out. We want your heroes and heels. That's coming your way. But when we come back, that's coming up at 8:18. But when we come back, something that the Lions have done really well this year, but aren't getting enough credit for. We'll explain what that is after this. You know what's really fun about following a really good football team or a really good team in general? The number of accolades they receive or that you can talk about them justifyingly getting, and then the records that seemingly fall by the wayside. Jahmyr Gibbs made team history. He had 99 scrimmage yards, including 90 on the ground, 2 touchdowns. Gibbs became the third Lion with Billy Sims and Barry Sanders to record 1,000+ scrimmage yards and 10+ touchdowns in his first 2 seasons. That's incredible company. Now, Detroit hasn't had this stable full of great running backs. James Jones wasn't that. Steve Owens wasn't that. Dexter Bussey wasn't that. Horace King was not that kind of guy. Don't get me wrong. But those are 2 of, like Billy Sims, I say this all the time. If you listen to the show long enough, he was as good a back as you would see in the National Football League. And I mean that. He had everything. He could catch out of the backfield. He was super strong and he was super fast. He didn't have Barry Sanders jukes and moves. He didn't. Nobody does. Nobody's there. I don't think you'll ever see a running back like that. I heard a lot of people talking after the game last night from the Rams and the Eagles about Saquon Barkley, who I like a lot. He's a special player. He was awesome at Penn State. I liked him with the Giants. I think he's, healthy, and he's had incredible success for the Eagles. I wish him well because he seems like a really good dude, and I think he's legitimately in the MVP conversation. And as I said in the 6 o'clock hour, he's been there in my mind for a while now. But he's no Barry Sanders. Okay. Those guys from the Rams and the Eagles saying, I've never seen a running back like him. I take them at their word. They're playing the game, right? But they never played against Barry. And if you watch it, when you say, I've never seen anything like that, I take you literally. Watch film of Barry Sanders. Are you too young to even remember who Barry Sanders was or watched Barry Sanders? Go back and watch some of the greatest running backs of all time. I saw clips of Eric Dickerson not too long ago. He was an amazing running back. Just incredible, right? And this all depends on when you grow up, right? I mean, this is the players you follow, the players who you hold near and dear. I may not have liked the Bears, but I loved Walter Payton. I may not have liked the Dallas Cowboys, but I really appreciated how good Tony Dorsett was, right? I'd take Tony Dorsett over Emmitt Smith any single day of the week. Billy Sims was an amazing player. Cut way too short because of injury. He could do it all. Jahmyr Gibbs to be in the Sims and Sanders conversation is pretty awesome. Aaron Glenn and what his defense has done. The Lions and their balance and how good they are. All those things. Really phenomenal, right? The thing that I don't think they get nearly enough credit for, and I credit the coaching staff for this as much as anybody else, is the discipline. They had 5 penalties yesterday. Detroit is amongst the league leaders in penalties. In a good way. They've committed only 68 penalties all season long. That's in line with Buffalo and Philadelphia and Miami and teams like that. They don't hurt themselves. Ironically enough, the 2 teams who have committed the most penalties from what I've looked in the football database is Baltimore and Houston. The teams that have committed the fewest going into play yesterday, Arizona and Cincinnati and the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh led. But Detroit has been so good in that regard. I give them a massive amount of credit for their discipline because I think it's a big reason why they are so successful. I'll give you an example. Indianapolis yesterday. Sure, there's a lot of reasons for the loss. Detroit's defense was really good. Their offense was special, right, outside the first quarter. And Anthony Richardson was terrible. But Indianapolis committed 10 penalties. Detroit committed half that. I don't think enough is written about that. And I don't think enough is said about that. It's literally almost every week you feel like, that could be a hero. As in our Hero and Heel segment, which comes up at 8:18. How much are you noticing that, if at all? You see, in football, Yeah, I think football, there are so many different things to watch in football. Honestly, I don't know how you watch games, but when you watch baseball, you're just watching the pitcher against the batter, right? I mean, unless you're at the ballpark and you're with my father, God rest his soul, who's telling me only watch Alan Trammell. Now, for the next 2 innings, only watch Lou Whitaker. Watch their pregame setup and all that stuff. I mean, it is. It's fascinating to me. There are so many things going on in a baseball game that people don't recognize. But for the most part, people are watching pitcher, batter, right? Okay. Yeah, I mean, you'll see catcher with signs and stuff. And if the play-by-play guy or the director wants to take you a different route, sure, you'll go different places. Basketball, and you're a basketball coach. Are you watching guys set screens? Are you watching them move away from the ball, or are you only focused on the ball itself? Mostly watching the ball. All right. If I'm calling a game, obviously I have to watch the ball. But when I'm not watching, if I'm not calling a game, I'm watching every place but the ball. That's just me. Hockey, it's a little bit more challenging, right? For me, I got to watch the puck as much as possible. It's hard to watch guys away from the puck. Football, I probably watch more away from the ball than I do with the ball. I will pick out a certain individual and I will watch them specifically. I love watching Frank Ragnow. Yeah. So there is no wrong answer. You're 100% right about that. I tweeted this out yesterday because Frank Ragnow not only blocked his guy at the defensive line, reached the second level and got a guy there too to free Gibbs up or Montgomery. I can't even recall because I was watching Ragnow. But I tweeted out, if you don't love Frank Ragnow, you don't love big boy football. He is so underrated and, dare I say, underappreciated. But that's because we're throwing flowers at the feet of David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jared Goff and Sam Laporta and Jamison Williams. That's all people want to talk about. I get it. I do. I'm not angry about it, but I understand it. For me, see, we talk about the offensive line as a whole. People will go out there and you'll ask them, oh, yeah, I love the offensive line. Oh, yeah, what do you like about it? Oh, they're just great. They're the best. Watch them individually and watch how good they are. Or watch them tag team. Like Graham Glasgow had a really good game yesterday. Watch them tag team a guy, twist and turn, or reach and then twist a guy inside. It's amazing how strong and quick they have to be. Philadelphia it was really good examples last night of Philadelphia pulling their guards. That's hard for a 300-pound man to do. And yet they find a way to do it, and they do it gracefully. It's amazing to me. It's one of the most underrated parts of what the Lions have done. And sometimes I worry because, and I'm guilty of this too, we label teams, all teams, whether or not they can do it or not, but we label them with a specific strength. And the Lions' strength seems to be their offense. Look at how great they are. Absolutely. But damn, we got to recognize that their defense is really good. That offensive line is the primary reason their offense is good. Jared Goff doesn't have to worry that much. Look at other quarterbacks around the league. Get the red zone, okay? And watch other quarterbacks and watch how distressed they can be. All right? Yeah. Yep. And Aleem McNeil is one of those guys. And I think he's an underrated player. He was fantastic. He was a wrecking ball. Yeah. And remember, I mean, here's a guy who got his contract extension. David Montgomery got his contract extension. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jared Goff, all these guys getting contract extensions in a day and age where we see so many players, or we talk and bitch about so many players who are getting fat and happy because they got their extension. And then they come out and these guys play as hard as they do. Doesn't that restore your faith in athleticism and athletics today? It does for me. Anyway, we focus all those things, but the penalties can absolutely ruin drives and absolutely ruin games for teams. It happens time and time again. Detroit is one of the most disciplined teams in the NFL, And not enough is being made about how important that has been to their success. I love the fact that they do, and remember this, they do so much motion. When you do that much motion, you can easily see why a guy would start moving toward the line of scrimmage earlier than he should. It happened to Goddard last night a number of times. He was whistled for that. When you throw as often as they do, you could understand if there were more holding calls than there are. And you don't see that very often, do you, from the Lions? I wish I could break this down and see how many holding calls there were from this football database. I don't see that right away, and I don't want to. Offensive holding, here we go. OH, not OHIO, but OH. Holding calls, offensive holding calls, I've got here under the football. Five. Think about that for a second. Is that crazy or what? Yeah. The movement. How many times they go they kill at the line of scrimmage? How many times are they doing that? That forces, I mean, those sounds, that forces a reaction, and they are incredibly disciplined. That's amazing to me. Now, the counter argument to that is they've committed more offensive pass interferences, or I should say defensive pass interferences, than any team in football, 14. But still, they weren't bad in that yesterday, were they? It's amazing to me that not enough has been recognized for that. In a season of football, when you have 17 games in 18 weeks, and you are basically talking about football or writing about football on a regular basis every day. That's the beauty of what football is. We say this all the time. They are the measuring stick for every league. Every league would love to have as much attention drawn to their sport as the National Football League does to theirs, not just because of the football play-by-play rights, but because football writers every day are writing something. Why hasn't it been talked about more about the penalties or lack thereof? It really is. Now, there are exceptions to the rules all the time. We know that. Last year, for example, is a pretty good example of that. Kansas City was middle of the road. The teams that were least penalized a year ago were the Raiders, the Bengals, the Chargers, and the Jaguars, which is kind of interesting. I'm not going to go back into all these different historical significant numbers associated with Super Bowl champs. You're bound to make mistakes. You're bound to get penalized. All I'm telling you is I think what Detroit has done this year has been really impressive, offensively, defensively, special teams coaching, but also from a discipline aspect. And in addition to that, the players stepping forward and doing what they've done to elevate your game the way so many have been asked to do. So many players have been asked to, I need more out of you because this is our situation right now. And they're doing it. Aleem McNeil's a really good example of it yesterday. I don't care who you are. Most people, when you thought of the Lions defense, where did your mind go? Aiden Hutchinson won. Who was number two? Probably Jack Campbell. Probably Alex Anzalone. Based from last year now, okay? Number three, a lot of people, Brian Branch is definitely in that conversation. I think he's in the conversation for All-Pro, right? Or Pro Bowler. How many names did you have to go through before you reach Aleem McNeil? Quite a few. My hope is that this season, despite some of the trials and tribulations that this team has had to deal with, and every team has to deal with that. My hope is this season we are starting to recognize how good other players are at what they do. It's hard to get a consistent pass rush as a defensive tackle because quarterbacks today are very mobile and moving outside the pocket. Anthony Richardson's a good example from last week, or from yesterday. That's number one. Number two, you are easily double teamed, at least on a chip block. All right. And sure, you can chip block defensive ends with a tight end or a running back, but we're talking about two massive human beings inside doubling you oftentimes. When you get a 4-man front, you're up against 5 guys. Unless you're bringing pressure on a blitz, you're getting double teamed if you're Elite McNeil by a center guard combo. A lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times. I hope people are recognizing the influence and the impact that he is having on this defense. And all I'm asking Lions fans to do is pretty simple. I'm not asking you to watch the game differently or not root and recognize the greatness that is the running back combination, the passing completions from Jared Goff to Amon-Ra St. Brown or Sam Laporta or Jamison Williams. I'm asking you to recognize how important some of the other guys are in this ultimate team-oriented sport, and that the discipline that this team possesses is super impressive. 5 holding penalties? Is that what you said, Trent? 5 holding penalties? That is unbelievable. Even for tight ends. I mean, I'm not just talking about the offensive line. Remember, Detroit's wide receivers and tight ends are some of the best at what they do in blocking downfield. Brock Wright's a good blocking tight end. How many holding calls? Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams get downfield, get dirty, and are willing to block on screens and block on running plays. It's not just Penei Sewell leading the charge. It's not just he and Kevin Zeitler pulling and leading the charge on some type of screen. You've got to have a downfield block. I don't care if it's chicken fighting or putting guys on their backs. Those guys do what they're supposed to do. It's really impressive. And yet there's only been 5 times where they've been whistled for offensive holding going into the game against Indianapolis. That's almost unheard of. The Meyer Hotline, 866-838-4843. You can text the show, Sports Radio, to 21,000. Always excited for the 8 o'clock hour. We have our final results from our poll question. We have our daily wager from Friday. 8:18, we have our Heroes and Heel. The best of the weekend, not just individually. You can go team, you can go coach, you can go organization. We've done it before. We'll get creative. We'll do it again. We look for yours on the other side on X's and Bros when we continue on a Monday morning after this. All right, here we go. The final hour of X's and Bros throughout the great state of Michigan every Monday through Friday, 6 until 9. I hope you and yours have a safe and healthy and a happy Thanksgiving. A really good win for the Lions yet again yesterday. They knock off the Colts in Indianapolis 24-6. 9 consecutive wins now for Detroit, matches the franchise record that was set back in 1934 when they started 9-0. Jahmyr Gibbs with 2 more rushing touchdowns. David Montgomery with a rushing touchdown. Detroit's defense, the unsung hero. They hold the Colts to just 96 yards on the ground, 172 yards through the air, and only 11 first downs, just 5 penalties. This is something we're going to continue to bring up on a regular basis. Detroit now 10-1, the best team in football, the leader in the division, all just by a game over Minnesota. Really, it's a game and a half because they've already beaten Minnesota, and they get the Vikings a little bit later on. They are also the only unbeaten team on the road this year with just 2 road games left, at Chicago, at San Francisco. Both places difficult, very challenging. Let's not expect them to run the table. Let's see how they do. Although the way this team has played, I wouldn't put it past them. Chicago, a loser yesterday in overtime to Minnesota, 30-27. They have now lost 5 in a row. Matt, that whole front office has got to be on pins and needles, just like the Giants. I mean, what an absolute disaster that they've had. Red Wings are going to visit the Islanders tonight. Detroit has dropped 4 of 5. Thank goodness for the Lions. Seriously, I mean, if they're not playing like they are, if you rewound the clock, give me 4 years ago with this Lions team, 4 or 5 years ago, with the way the Red Wings are playing, losing 4 of 5. The lone win was against the Islanders, and that's where they visit tonight. Think about what we'd be talking about. Or the Pistons. I mean, the Pistons, they're welcoming Toronto to town. Detroit's dropped 3 in a row. Fortunately, Toronto is a team that is not a serious contender. They're 4-12 on the year, and they've yet to win on the road so far this season. Michigan State, they're on the road. I know you want to call it a neutral site. They're playing Colorado in the Maui Invitational. Michigan State looking to improve to 5-1. Here's our poll question of the day. Which team is a bigger threat to the Lions in the NFC North? Minnesota or Green Bay? Here's also what I wonder. What if is Minnesota more of a threat than Philadelphia in the NFC overall? I think people are really impressed with the Eagles, and they should be. They're almost, no pun intended, flying under the radar. Anyway, you can vote as often as you want. Do so by going to our Twitter page or X page at XB Morning, or I've retweeted it as well at Shep Matt if you follow me as well. All right, let's get to the final results from Friday. And we've got the Daily Wager brought to you by Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort coming up as well. Their sportsbook Ascend. We'll tell you about that here in a moment. Here's our poll question from Friday. If you remember, the Pistons played the other day in their Motor City uniforms. It's the uniform that acknowledges the 1989 championship team. It's the Bad Boys feel, the Bad Boys colors of orange and black. The irony there is that really, I mean, the Bad Boys were 88, 89. When Rick Mahorn was on our show last week, what did I say to him? I said, I think your 88 team was as good as the 89 and 90 team. Now, he wasn't on the 1990s championship team. But I said, I think your team was as good as in 88 as it was in 89. He said, you got to win. And I thought Detroit got completely hosed in Game 7 in L.A., but I digress. Yeah. Thumbs up or thumbs down on the Pistons Motor City uniforms? Yes or a no? What was the final results? Okay, this would be another poll question for later on this year. Once we move past football and we're into the winter months and we're waiting for spring training. Of Detroit's alternative uniforms, Motor City, this one, the Bad Boys, the homage to the Bad Boys. The black and silver ones, What were those called? Do you recall? I mean, it had like, it looked like the tire tracks up the front, like you just got run over. The teal, which makes me throw up in my mouth. Oh my God, dude! I look. I covered that team for a long, long time with those uniforms, and Grant Hill and Jerry Stackhouse and Joe Dumars and Christian Leitner and Jerome Williams and those guys. That was a horrible look. Absolutely horrible look. That's an embarrassing moment in Pistons lore, that the Pistons caved to the NBA mandate of changing their color. There's no reason for it. I didn't want to look like Charlotte. I didn't want to look like all these other teams, right? That were tweaking their uniforms to go to a different, in color. In fact, I believe the rumor at the time was the NBA want the Pistons, if they were going to have something like that, they wanted to go with something steel and purple. I think it was purple. Could be wrong, but steel was going to be the primary because the Motor City, right? They wanted something associated with the city, and the NBA wanted them to go with this route. And I thought, what a horrible, horrible agreement. Well, it lasted long enough. I know it is. It lasted way too long. It looked like, I mean, if you recall, the International Hockey League was a big thing back then. The Vipers were eggplant and teal, and the Pistons followed suit with at least the teal part of it. It drove me absolutely crazy. And then they had the burgundy too. Those aren't even your colors. I get it if your colors suck. All right. If you got a color like purple, like Sacramento or Toronto, and you want to deviate, go right ahead. You've got red, white, and blue. You've got you've got the coolest, among the coolest uniforms in all of sports. In that sport, anyway. Yeah, I don't know if they I don't know if I'd go so far as to say they still are. I mean, let's pump it for a minute. They've got 4 championships. Okay. But there's a massive difference between the Lakers, the Celtics, unfortunately, the Bulls, the Spurs, and Detroit. Okay? Just right. Detroit was, yeah. I mean, Detroit was, yeah, Golden State is another one. Detroit was one of the elite franchises in the NBA. And you could actually say one of the elite franchises in sports, to be honest with you. So anyway, that would be a really good poll question later on. It would be those different alternative uniforms of those, which ones do you like the most? We'll think about that a little later on. All right, let's get quickly to our daily wager, brought to you by Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort. Go to Ascend at their sportsbook. Fantastic place for food, cold drinks, and a great place to watch any of the sporting events that matter most to you. What was the daily wager on Friday, and how did we do today? Or what do we have today? Sledge. Yeah, nice win. Wow. Good for you. Much better than Bill Simmons, who yesterday said, take it to the bank that you're going to have Drake May account for at least 1 touchdown, and he's going to meet his rushing, he's going to meet his passing, and New England's going to cover the 7.5. They didn't cover the 7.5. He did throw a touchdown. He didn't meet the rushing, and he didn't rush for a touchdown. But 2 out of 4 ain't bad. Thank you, Helen Reddy. All right, when we come back, hero and heels. Who was the best of the weekend for you, and who was the worst? We've got our suggestions when X's and Bros continues after this. Every Monday we do at 8:18 Heroes and Heels. It's the best of the weekend and the worst of the weekend. We welcome your thoughts on that via the Meyer hotline, 866-838-4843, or you can text the show with your hero or heel at Sports Radio 21,000. My hero is one of the guys who helped Oklahoma upset Alabama on Saturday night. Captain middle linebacker Danny Stuntman. He's probably going to be an NFL player. He's good. They like him a lot. He had 4 tackles, and that means he has 100 tackles on the year. 100 tackles in each of his last 3 years. As a sophomore, he had 124. As a junior, he had 104, and he's got 100 so far this year and still a couple games to play. Remember, this is the guy who gave up a lot of his NIL money to walk-ons because he appreciated their sacrifice. Now, I'm going to cheat a little bit, admittedly. I also have another one, so I hope I'm not stealing yours. But it's Dexter Lawrence, the defensive tackle of the New York Giants. Did you hear what he said after his team was thoroughly embarrassed by Tampa, 30-7, to drop them 2-9 on the year, 0-6 at MetLife Stadium? Not that we care about the Giants, but he said this to The Athletic. I mean, he was angry. A lot of players were angry. Malik Neighbors was pissed off too. He said, "We played soft. They beat the blank out of us today." He used the word soft. Malik Neighbors called the Giants soft as blank after complaining a little bit more. He said, first, second quarter, I don't get the ball. Start getting targets at the end. I mean, I can't do nothing. Starting the ball, we're down 30-0. What do you want me to do? Now, that's a little bit more of a selfish attitude. I like what Dexter Lawrence said, and he used it as a team in general. Sometimes leaders have to call out their team. As long as they're performing and they're doing what they're supposed to, you can do that. Dexter Lawrence did it, but primarily it's Danny Stuntman with a 1B to Dexter Lawrence for my hero of the weekend. How about you, Trent? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not many people have talked about it. They have the 2 losses. Do you know who the 2 losses are to? Does it even matter? It doesn't matter to me. But do you know who the losses are to? Atlanta by a point, and they've lost to Tampa by 17. Very strange. Yeah. So obviously the reason many of us feel, and I'm in that camp, and I said it earlier today, why Philadelphia is that threat. Detroit's won 9 in a row. Philly's won 7. 7 straight games. Here's who they have left on their schedule. They're at Baltimore. They're home against Carolina. They're home to Pittsburgh. They're at Washington. And they're home to Dallas. And they also are home to the Giants. So you would figure, look, Washington come back down to earth a little bit. At Baltimore is going to be really hard. Carolina's a win. Giants are a win at the end of the year. Cowboys are a win at the end of the year. That's 3. They've got, I would say, the Pittsburgh game. So you got Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Washington. Those will be challenging games. Although Philly does get Pittsburgh at home, they've already lost 1 game at home. So I don't always believe that the home team automatically holds serve. Those are challenging games. They're playing really good football. Detroit has a more favorable schedule, I think, than Philadelphia. I think it's important to monitor. I really do. See, it's easy to get tied up in Minnesota because they're within the division, and Detroit plays them again. Keep an eye on Philly and their schedule and see how they're doing, and the teams they still have yet to play are doing, because that's home field, man. And you know it as well as I do. In December, okay? And it's going to be a little bit later than that. Hell, it's going to be January, isn't it? It's going to be mid-January where you begin the playoffs and you play at Philadelphia instead of home. Don't lose sight of that. So Philadelphia and Saquon Barkley, that's a good one on you. I need you to pay attention to what is happening with the Eagles the rest of the way. You do not want to go to Philadelphia. And I believe Detroit's the best team in the NFL. I don't care where they play per se, but I'd much rather have it at home than in Philadelphia, where the elements cause an issue for your team's strength. And that is balance, right? Philly's travels. Their running game travels. Detroit's game travels with running game, and I think Detroit's defense is better. But I want you to keep track of what's going on with the Eagles and who they got left on their schedule. All right, my heel, Colorado, as in Colorado Buffaloes. They were ranked 16th in the country, playing below average Kansas, and need the wins to clinch a Big 10 or Big 12 championship. Big 12 championship game. Eventually, right? What they would hope would be a college football playoff game, too. You win the Big 12, you're going to go into the college football playoff. What do? They fumble it away. Jayhawks beat the Buffs 37-21. This wasn't close, all right? They possessed the ball for more than 40 minutes, did Kansas. They rushed for over 330 yards. They finished with 520 total yards of offense. Now Colorado has to beat Oklahoma State and get some help to reach their destination. Now, perhaps we should be putting KU among the heroes instead of associated with the heel of the weekend. Because after all, they are the first team in history with a losing record to beat 3 straight AP top 25 teams. They did it, and the latest was Colorado, and Colorado's my heel for the weekend. How about you? Good. Yeah. Lions defense, a big reason for that. Back-to-back games where they have not allowed a touchdown, first time since 1999. We get your heroes and heels on the other side, and a crazy college football weekend closes things up here on X's and Bros after this. Can't believe Kyron Williams only got 11 points last night in fantasy. I'm going to lose again. Oh, Mike is on. Sorry. Welcome back, X's and Bros. It's incredible. I'm only up 10 points, and J.K. Dobbins is going to get 10 points for sure tonight. So I'm totally screwed. Yeah, you would think. I mean, I don't wish for anyone to get hurt, but maybe he tweaks something. I got the Chargers. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm really impressed with what the Chargers have done this year. I mean, they've been disciplined. They've run really well. Their defense is really good. He's a really good football coach. He's a weird dude, but he's a really good football coach, and he gets guys to respond. Now, I don't know the difference between now and when he was in San Francisco and maybe even with Michigan. I don't know how different he is. I don't know how much he may wear on players, because that was the big belief in San Francisco. That's why it amazes me what Mike Tomlin has done and what John Harbaugh has been able to do and what Andy Reid has been able to do. It's one thing winning and coaching up players. It's another thing before it gets a little much for players to hear the constant sayings and the constant strong advice and suggestions, and perhaps in this case, maybe over enthusiasm. Who knows? I would hope people wouldn't hold that against him. You want someone to be positive. You want someone to be excited. What we see in the media is not always what players and coaches are seeing behind the scenes. But he's done a hell of a job. He really has. I don't think he's necessarily coach of the year, but he's in the conversation. I mean, somebody had said last week, oh, it's between Harbaugh and Dan Campbell. I think they've all done a really good job. Kevin O'Connell's done a hell of a job in Minnesota, okay? With Sam Darnold as his quarterback. Mike Tomlin, as I mentioned, constantly has done a hell of a job. I don't think coaches should be eliminated just because their team was really good the year before and aren't good again. There are too many times we just assume that the coach of the year or the player of the year, not necessarily player of the year, but coach of the year has to come from a pool of guys or ladies whose team wasn't good last year and suddenly is good this year. Andy Reid has done a phenomenal job in Kansas City. I don't care how many close games they've played. They've won. They're 10-1 for crying out loud. And they've won back-to-back Super Bowls. That constant thought of what's harder, winning your first or being a defending champion. Well, I don't know, because I haven't experienced it. In talking with players, they tell me a lot. It's really hard to repeat. And Andy Reid's is a repeat champion, and he still if the playoffs started today, he's got home field. How could he not be in the conversation? I mean, yeah. Oh, I thought it was twice. Okay. Yeah. Yes, but it's based on whether or not you've done the best job this year. And when you lose, would he be your number one receiver? Was Rashee Rice their number one receiver? Yes. Would Isaac Pacheco be their number one running back? Yes. He's been able to get it done in what has turned out to be, a pretty competitive division, but in a challenging schedule. But just because they haven't been blowing teams out, they won 11 games last year, right, Trent? 11 regular season games. They're almost there now. Are you trying to tell me he shouldn't be in the conversation? That's moronic. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And should be in the hot seat. Um, Let me ask you this question, and just be honest. There's no bias here. I hope you don't have any bias. Is Phil Jackson one of the best NBA coaches of all time? Okay. Do you know how many times he won NBA Coach of the Year? I think he won it once. I think he won it one time. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he he had teams with great players and everybody just assumed they should win it. Pat Riley won it 3 times. And I'm not taking anything away from Pat Riley. Greg Popovich won it 3 times. Mike Budenholzer won it twice. If I asked you who has more NBA coaches of the year, is it Phil Jackson or Cotton Fitzsimmons? What would your answer be? Yeah, but it's Cotton Fitzsimmons, and I know it's a different sport, okay. But my point is, it's based on who is. Tell me who in the world is voting on this stuff. I mean, those are the first things that you have to figure out. Who is naming, who is voting on Coach of the Year, and I'd like to know sometimes a little bit their credential, just to hold them accountable a little bit. I go through this a lot of times with, the baseball awards and specifically the Hall of Fame. I just think it's ridiculous. I do. And for you to say Andy Reid's only won it once, but Bruce Arians and Kevin Stefanski and Ron Rivera have won it twice is idiots. It's idiocy. I'm sorry. Because you have an impact, you have more of an impact, I would argue. I would argue that football coaches, head coaches, have more of an impact on their team's games than any other head boss. I would say Major League Baseball managers are pretty damn close right behind them. Okay? That's a generality, but that's my belief. Don Shula, by the way, has won it more than anybody else. He's won it 4 times. Bill Belichick won it 3 times. But Andy Reid only once, I think, is ridiculous. I really do. He won it as often as Wayne Fontes and Ray Rhodes. Honestly, figure that out for me and get back with me. All right, let's get to some texts. You can text the program, Sports Radio, to 21,000. Go ahead, fire away. I did, yeah. Yeah, really rough. The Lions is a good one, but let me say this respectfully. The thing we like about Heroes and Heels is what I've tried to get is to try and dig deep. The Lions are an easy one because they've won 9 in a row. I'm not saying they're not appropriate. I'm not saying it's a wrong answer, but it's an easy one. You know, I mean, and this is not a knock on anybody. I'm not saying mine are better because I think Saquon Barkley probably is the best answer, but it's also the easiest answer. Look at what he did. You know, I want people to think deep. I want you to go deep into what you witnessed over the weekend to tell me what you think was one of the best performances. If you're specific and say the Lions defense, because they've held back-to-back opponents without a touchdown for the first time since 1999. Bingo, right? Again, there's no wrong or right answer in any of this. My hope is that we're going a little bit deeper than just Sunday afternoon. Give me another one. Ooh. Nice. Nice. Really good. Really good. Yeah. Yeah. So what I was trying to figure out I love that. I love Aaron Glenn. I love the specificity of it because of how good his defense was. So kudos to you. Why did Daniel Jones ask for it? Okay. But you're not going, no one's picking you up, right? You think this year? Okay. Okay. I hope you're right. I think he can be a serviceable quarterback. I think I'd like him. I'd love him as a backup. I wouldn't want him starting 17 games for me, but if I was in a pinch and I needed him to start a few games, I'd be fine with that. You know, not that we don't have a body of work on Daniel Jones because we do. Have you seen the way Bryce Young has played lately? Pretty good. Yeah, he's playing. Yeah, he's playing pretty well. Not that Daniel Jones needs a grace period like Bryce Young, but in quarterbacks, sometimes Sam Darnold in Minnesota, for example, Jameis Winston, sometimes in different situations, quarterbacks go to certain places and it's a relief for them. Now, maybe it's New York. I mean, that's a possibility. Let's not lose sight of that. But Daniel Jones wanting to move on, I think has also added to the frustration of a lot of Giants players, because I think Giants players look at it and go, who's the best guy to give us a chance to win? He may not be an all-pro. He's not a Pro Bowler. He's not the best quarterback in the division, let alone the conference or the league. But who gives us the best chance to win? If you're going to ask us to give it everything we got every single day, then we're asking you to give us everything you got. And that means, as a decision, how do you start Tommy DeVito, who is your third string quarterback, over a guy like Daniel Jones, who may not be great, he may not be perfect, but he's better than that guy? Anybody else with a hero or a heel? All right. Boy, it is. Yeah, very impressive win over Army. They've come along. Notre Dame has come along. I mean, it was a pretty interesting weekend of what took place in college football. Ole Miss looks like they're in trouble. Obviously, Alabama, I don't see how they make it. BYU, seriously disappointing. Indiana, thought they'd be a little bit more competitive than they were at Ohio State. The offense neutralized, and let's face it, they do not have a strong schedule to fall back on. It's not taking anything away from what the Hoosiers have done. I'm rooting for them, but it's going to be really tough. All right, we got another one, right? Oh, nice. Love it. Mm-hmm. You know what's interesting? Freddie with Jalen Duren. I don't think he's alone in this. I can be just as guilty as anybody else. We find certain players that have to prove more to us than anybody else. I don't want to say we don't like them. I don't want to say we hate them. I don't want to say we don't believe in them. But they have a steeper climb to garner our admiration. How's that? And I think it's pretty obvious for Freddie whose his is. If you had to take one player, let's just say Detroit, let's not say nationally. If you had to take one player and tell me who that is for you, in other words, it's hard to impress you. That player is hard to impress you because you've made up your mind what kind of player he is. Who would it be for you? Okay. No. I said any athlete. Okay. So you're saying 2 years ago really didn't convince you, right? Okay. But last year did. Well, that's why I say, I mean, 2 years ago didn't convince you. when he had 31 and 94 in state all year. That wasn't convincing enough for you, is my point. Okay. So you need to see it multiple years. Right? Okay. I do. No. I don't think you're being too hard on him. I just, when you say he's got to stay in the league, I need to see it. I need to see him stay in the league all year. He did that 2 years ago. When I need to see consistent power, he did that 2 years ago. And even though it's not consistent. Yeah. I understand that. And I don't think you're wrong there. Freddie with Jalen Duren, in case people missed it, against Orlando in a loss, had 7 points and 4 rebounds and 3 personal fouls and in 25 minutes. And Freddie's right. Okay, he's flat out right when it comes to that stuff. For me, it would probably, and this is why I ask you this. For me, it's probably Jamison Williams. You're looking for but mine is more decision making than it is ability. Yours is about ability, which I grant and I understand. You're looking for consistency in a guy for the field of play that is, I think, hard. I'm looking for consistency in your character, which I think should be easier. And you said it's easy with Spencer Torkelson, and yet with mine, not saying that mine's right, but with my guy, where's it ever been consistent? It's never been there. Yeah. So I guess my point is we use that, and I don't think you're alone, by the way. I think a lot of people feel that way. The first name that comes to mind is probably Spencer Torkelson. He accomplished something, at least in 1 year. I know it's not enough, but he accomplished it a hell of a lot better than what Jamison Williams ever did. Answer me this. What's he done? Besides be fast, what's he done? Oh, he does. Yeah. Yeah. Well, but why is it always got to be next season? We said that in the offseason last year, that this year was going to be really big for him, right? Again, please don't take it the wrong way. I'm not saying my answer is more right than yours. I'm just wondering. We set these standards for certain players. I think this goes to my point. We set the standard for certain players, but we don't hold anybody else to the same standard because we like them or because they give us something we haven't seen. Oh, the speed. I'm so enamored with the speed. I love it too. I mean, he was more of a middle of the field threat yesterday than he was downfield. I like it too. Don't get me wrong. I just think we need to stay consistent. That's all. Thanks for your text. Appreciate it as always. Thanks to Trent Bally. We're back with you tomorrow morning. X's and Bros here throughout the great state of Michigan, 6 until 9 on the Michigan Sports Network. Have a great Monday, everybody, and thanks for listening.